throw rocks from the sideline and just make daily complaints. You actually roll up your sleeves here in the chamber and you work with governments. You work with our government. I've worked very closely with our government. You work with the state governments. You're a very practical organisation focused on getting the right outcomes for the Western Australian economy. And what I know is what's good for the Western Australian economy is good for the national economy. And so I do want to thank the chamber for their partnership they've had with us. I'm sure Premier Gowan feels the same way, just about the constructive way the chamber engages. I think it is a national standout when it comes to representative bodies in this country, in the pragmatic, respectful and I think very diligent way that you conduct yourselves. So to you, Chris, and to you, Nicole, thank you very much for your leadership in that regard. On the 20th, can I acknowledge, of course, all my colleagues who I can see here with me, and we've already called the roll for them today, but it's a shame we can't have more in the room today. Every time I've spoken here in the West, the chamber has turned out in large numbers, and I particularly remember the last time up in Kings Park, which was a great time, but we've been through a lot since then. And it's tremendous to be back here with you. But to Michaela, of course, and to Linda and Melissa, who's here, and Benny Morton and the team who are with us here today, I want to thank you for the leadership. I mean, this is just a fraction of the Western Australians in my cabinet and in my ministry. There are many more, of course. If there were a change of government, well, there wouldn't be, well, I'm not even sure there'd be one, frankly. There certainly hasn't been in the past often. And so under our government, we've had tremendously strong, passionate, dedicated representation from our Western Australian members, and they are such an important part of our team. So it was on the 24th of June in 2019, after the last election, that I made my first major economic speech after that election. And I did it right here in Western Australia, Perth, to the chamber. And I said to you then that whether it's the GST or other economic debates, the chamber would always come to the table and express their views in the way that I've already mentioned. So I appreciate that. I was here, as I just said, at Kings Park in April last year. And so, again, it's great to be here. Firstly, as I have already acknowledged, Annie Colleen, but can I acknowledge the traditional owners, the Noongar people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Can I also acknowledge any members of the Australian Defence Force and veterans who have joined us here today. I was out with the SAS Regiment yesterday and was out there thanking them for the amazing job that they do for our country. I'm very proud of the SAS Regiment. I'm very proud of the work that they do. They're proud Western Australians, even if they've come from all over the country. And I know Western Australia is very proud of the SAS Regiment as well. The SAS Regiment right now is over with their other colleagues in the Defence Forces, cleaning up what has been the worst flood I've ever seen in the Northern Rivers of New South Wales. It is absolutely heartbreaking to see what's occurring there. And I've seen Western Australians there in those flood impact zones. Those have come from government agencies here in Western Australia, those who've been part of the Defence Forces, volunteers who have just turned up. And, you know, we're one big country, and I'm so pleased that we're all together again. And I think that was demonstrated in the presence of Western Australians, Tasmanians and Victorians, South Australians, up there, Queenslanders, in the middle of those terrible floods. So thank you, Western Australia, and thank you to our Defence Forces in particular. We find ourselves in very different circumstances, though, to when we last met. COVID, of course, has been the test of our times, and the people of Western Australia, I think, can be rightly proud of how Western Australians have met this test. Today, on the other side of the country, as I've said, many thousands of Australians continue to deal with those devastating floods in both New South Wales and Queensland. Again, an enormous test of national resilience. And at the same time, we're facing a pivotal moment, I believe, in world history. An uncertain time, a very uncertain time for our global economy and global stability. Russia's illegal, unjustified, unprovoked war in the Ukraine, invading their neighbour, is an unconscionable assault on freedom and national sovereignty and a rules-based order that favours freedom. And so we stand with the people of Ukraine. And I met with the leaders of the Ukrainian community yesterday in Mirrabooka, and with many other ethnic community leaders here in Western Australia. with Vince Connolly, who's doing a terrific job as our candidate for Cowan and the ongoing member for Stirling. And we stand with those in the Ukraine, and we've stood with them in practical ways, not just in words. Tangible support, from medicines to missiles. That's what we're doing to help Ukraine right now. And we've been processing visas of Ukrainian applicants to come to Australia at unprecedented levels. And we'll be welcoming many Ukrainians to Australia in that way. But I think more than anything, the people of Ukraine, and particularly those who have Ukrainian ancestry here in Australia, will just want the best for their homeland and for people to be able to return there in peace and live there peacefully. But what all this shows is that the conflict in Europe means the global economy faces new headwinds, and we're not immune from the negative impact and the fallout from Russia's war of choice and their violent threats and following those through. We are facing the biggest energy shock since the 1970s, and that is likely to depress global growth, and we know higher oil prices means greater pressure on family budgets at the petrol bowser. We know that, we're all experiencing that, and we know what's caused it. And the challenges, therefore, are very great. But so are the opportunities, and this is what I love about Western Australia. Most optimistic place you could possibly find, and it's why I love coming back here over and over again, and have done so well before I even went into Parliament, because it's such a positive, optimistic place. And I want to commend Western Australians for that positivity, but I also want to commend you for your patience and your perseverance and public spiritedness over the last 3 years. We're coming through this latest wave in a once-in-a-century pandemic. And while I know in WA case numbers are just peaking now from the Omicron wave, your relatively low hospitalisations, almost completely zero hospitalisation rates at a severe level, and death rates are a testament to the strength of the public health response here in Western Australia. And WA now has the highest vaccination rates in the country, and I think that's to the great credit of the Western Australian people and the government's actions. And I'm advised that today Western Australia will reach 6 million vaccinations, and that's quite a milestone, and I congratulate you. Here in the West, the virus experience, though, has been different to the rest of the country, especially to the eastern states. You've travelled a somewhat different path. And throughout the pandemic, I have always acknowledged and respected Western Australia's unique situation and the path that WA has taken. And I continue to, and I do so. And Premier Gowan regularly acknowledges this, as we've gathered around the National Cabinet table 67 occasions in the last 2 years. And they aren't 10-minute meetings. These meetings will go for 2-3 hours, and on occasions even longer than that, particularly early in the pandemic.